Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast. We're glad you're here. And now our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
Hey everyone, Dr. Mike here to welcome you to another episode of the Mission First People Always podcast. It's the place where we talk about bringing out the best in each other as we strive to accomplish all the missions that are set before us. And we try to do everything with excellence. And so I'm excited about today's episode because we've all heard the expression, I was triggered, or he triggered me, or she triggered me. It's this idea that someone or something has thrown us off our game, and it becomes more difficult to do our best work and to experience joy in the moment. We're just kind of off when we're triggered. It's a response to a perceived threat, and we become more focused on defending ourselves than serving others, than adding value in the moment. And it's really frustrating when that happens. So we don't like to be triggered, and wish we weren't so easily triggered. So what do we do to proactively prevent it from happening? And how do we respond? How do we bounce back when it does? Well, today's guest has some answers for us. My guest today is Jeff Gaines, and I've known Jeff for, I guess, going on 10 years. I've worked side by side with him. He's a guy who's really, really good in the classroom. He grabs your attention. He's got good things to say, and I'm excited about presenting this new work that he's putting out into the world. And so I'll tell you a little bit about Jeff. Jeff has a degree in mechanical engineering. He worked in IT for a while, but he spent the majority of his career in the learning and development space. And he's really good at it. He has extensive experience developing leaders and teams in large organizations, small organizations, for-profit, nonprofit, the government. He's worked in every aspect of the industry. He's done some of his own work, but he's also been a master facilitator with top-notch companies like Fierce Conversations and Core Strengths, which is now Crucial Learning. He's authored a couple of books, and I'm really impressed with the fact that he's got a TED Talk that has over 1 million views. So, Jeff Gaines, welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks for having me. I got to get you on my marketing team with that TN. I should, in full disclosure, TEDx Talk, not TED Talk.
Okay.
For people who know the difference, they care about that. But yeah,
And
TEDx Talk, over 1 million views.
Yeah, apparently I don't know the difference, and perhaps I don't care, but the 1 million views caught my attention.
It's still a cool thing, yeah.
So, Jeff, your new offering is called Triggerproof. So I'm interested in what it means to be trigger-proof, and what prompted you to develop something new. I mean, there's a lot of training in the marketplace. There's a lot of good stuff in the marketplace. You and I present a lot of good stuff in the marketplace, but why is Triggerproof adding value, and why does the world need it?
I think the world is more triggering than it's ever been. I was sitting at a deck with some friends the other day, and they asked me kind of the same question. I'm launching this course called Triggerproof, and they're like, what's that? I said, well, do people you work with ever get triggered? And they said, all the time. I said, will it be a better workplace if they were triggered less? They said, absolutely. I'm like, well, there's your answer. So I think people pretty readily, like you were saying, people get triggered. But I think companies, it's one of those areas like, it would be great if there was less of this, but they're not really doing much about it. And so I just feel like the need is there. And I've got content that really speaks well to it. My TEDx talk was, 10 plus years ago. And the foundational material in that stuff is perfect to help people be more engaged, have less conflict, more connection, and be more resilient.
What do you think is the cause of, people being more triggered than ever in the marketplace? It was at COVID, and we went to our separate corners and huddled for 2 years. Is it greater levels of sensitivity as we find our tribe and go to war with other tribes? Is it a lack of just general respect and dignity in the workplace? How do we get here?
If I had to pick a word, I'd say technology.
Okay. Tell us
So,
about that.
even before COVID, I think it was happening. I think you can trace it back ways. The short reality that people know, there's higher expectations, there's lower budgets, there's less people. All those realities are creating a more stress-laden workplace. There's more expected of people. But to your point around tribal, technology is supposed to have made our lives easier, and there's certainly a lot of convenience to it. But in terms of the workplace, it's just increased demands. And it's also increasing isolation. There's less engagement, there's less connection, there's less a feeling of help. And I think we could dig a lot deeper into it, but it all culminates in, I have to do a whole lot more with less, and I'm kind of alone in doing it.
Mm. And it's much easier, I think, to get frustrated and say bad things about people that I'm not shoulder to shoulder with, face to face with every day. It's somebody on a screen, somebody far away. It's just, I've always said that it's hard to really dislike somebody that you know really well. And I'm wondering if we know people less well today than we did in the past.
100%. And I'm going to add to that, technology allows us to feel connected to a tribe I'm not really a part of.
Yeah.
Right. So, I can go online and connect with whatever, flat earthers, a fun one to look at. It used to not really be a thing. And then there's a chart you can show of the growing of flat earth believers. And then YouTube changed the algorithm to stop recommending more and more increasingly extreme flat earth stories. And it started to go down. But, before technology, if I was in the lunchroom like, hey, I think the earth's flat, people would be like, okay, well, I'm going to eat lunch over here and you can sit at the flat earth table by yourself. Now there's 10,000 people at that table.
Yeah.
So not only am I disconnected from you because we're just not talking, but I'm really validated in my more and more increasingly self-focused belief system.
Yep. The extreme views, the conspiracists, the people that are way out there on the far extremes of society now can find each other.
You got all kinds of friends to do that with. And, relating that to the workplace, when it was all in person, there was the meeting after the meeting. There was always silos, there were always cliques. That always happened. But nowadays with the hybrid or full remote workplace, there's just no organic relationship growth. There's no connection. The meeting starts, we go, it's over, we're done. The only time
on to my next meeting that starts right now.
Yeah. We got to finish because I'm already getting reminders that it started a minute ago. And so that's the reality. I have a son who works at Amazon, and they just mandated 100% back in person. No 3-day a week. Yeah. He loves it because he loves being in person. I would prefer that too, but I get that that's a bias when it's kind of how we work, but that's rare. Amazon can do it because they've got the money that they can just dictate it. A lot of companies are, Dell tried it and they got a big uprising over it. So the reality is the remote or at least hybrid workplace is something companies need to know how to master. And it is a more triggering environment. And you don't know when people are triggered. The meeting's over, boom, it's done. I just triggered half of my team and I'm not going to find out about that for 3 weeks.
And they're going to stew on it for several days. And in the meantime, productivity is down. I'm thinking about getting a different job. I'm thinking about how awful my boss is. All those things are happening. So Jeff, tell us what it means to be trigger proof. Tell us about, why I want to be trigger proof. I think it's about resiliency and being able to bounce back, but you know better than I do. Tell us what it's all about.
So I think the easiest way to think about what I mean by being triggered is to simplify human motivation. And I would simplify all of human drive into 2 categories. We're driven to create or we're driven to protect. And if you'll permit me, it's an oversimplification, but it works nicely to help understand a lot of different models. We're triggered when we're in that protect mode, when I feel unsafe, when I feel like I'm being disrespected, discounted, ignored. I'm driven to protect myself versus creating, adding value, making a difference. And I think what's critical for people to get, what I find a lot of leaders surprised by, is that most people, when they're triggered, don't look triggered. So when you ask the question, what does it mean to be triggered? For most leaders, the answer is you don't know they're getting triggered until maybe weeks later, or, it creeps into results. Most people, because they're in protect mode, are still doing their job. They're keeping themselves safe. So they're doing enough to get by.
So what you're saying is it doesn't, being triggered doesn't mean I'm shouting at people and I'm looking angry and raging and out of control. Yeah. I look normal, but I don't feel normal.
And I don't work normal. I think if it was obvious when people were triggered, I'd be far busier than I could be and have 100 people working for me, because I think if companies knew how much triggering was happening, they would absolutely devote a lot more to this reality. You've heard of fight or flight. Everyone's heard of fight or flight. It's actually fight, flight, or freeze. Mm-hmm. And recently they have found a fourth one that's kind of new in human reality called Fawn. So when triggered, the responses are fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fawn is when I become overly accommodating and maybe even smile and look happy. We recognize fight because that's what we think of with triggering somebody got angry, and it's really visible. But flight is avoid, run away, and they don't literally run. They just sit there and sit quiet, and they don't speak up. They don't disagree. They don't give you the information you need to make a good decision. There's, freeze, which looks exactly like often, but very different things are going on. And fawn, they're actually telling you, oh, a great idea. That's wonderful. We should totally do that. So of the four, I think the fight is actually not 25%. I think it's less than 25%. That's why most organizations don't realize how much triggering is happening.
So, Jeff, you've developed this course, and I think it's fairly new in the market. And so you're refining, getting feedback, looking for people to invite you in to test drive this. How do you help people through this course you've created? Tell us a little bit about your process, the drivers that impact being triggered or not, or getting out of being triggered. Just outline sort of your value proposition for folks.
Sure. So it is a new offering in that the Triggerproof brand is new, and it's triggerproof.us, not .com. So Triggerproof us, if you think of it that way, is your website. But the content, the driving force behind it is not new. So my TEDx talk, my book that I put out was about 13 years ago. And the foundational concepts in there I call the three drivers, which is a model of understanding how we process information and how we make decisions. And so that is not new. That I've had for many years. I've refined it and grown it. So I can comfortably say to an organization, it's not really test driving the effectiveness of this. I know it works. I've been working with Core Strengths, helped build that brand for a while, and I kind of put this content on the side a bit. And now I spent a lot more time with Core than I thought I was going to, because I came across folks like you. So great material, well tested, well refined. Now I've just decided that, what the marketplace I think I can most help with right now is this idea of triggering. So the three drivers is really the story. If I can give you the 3-minute pitch on that.
What is that story about the three drivers?
All right. So we as human beings are driven by either what I call our robot, logic, or emotion. So the robotic drive is unconscious behavior, things I do without thinking, and logic and emotion are pretty straightforward. The most common driver is the robot, because most of the things we do are unconscious. The strongest driver is emotion. And getting that our lives are about serving this emotional drive inside of us is what you need to be good at creating and staying out of protect mode. 2002 Nobel Prize in Economics awarded to Daniel Kahneman, who's a psychologist. Economics field gave their award to a psychologist who was able to prove that as human beings, we make decisions emotionally first, rationally second. And that confused a lot of people, especially in the economics world. I had a guy in one of my classes who said, I could see at times that like I'm upset or I'm angry, maybe I'm triggered, and people think of triggered as angry, where I was emotionally driven. But isn't success in the business world about not making emotional decisions? And I said, no, nobody's successful in the business world makes decisions without emotion, but they think they do. And he said, well, I could see times where I'm upset or angry, but otherwise I don't. I said, well, let me ask you some questions. Do you mind if we talk about money? He said, sure. I said, well, do you have debt? Do you have 6 months of savings? Do you have retirement? The basic financial health questions. And he said, yeah, to all of them. I said, how would it feel to carry a balance on your credit card every month? He said, it would feel awful. I don't know how people live that way. So is paying off that card a logical or an emotional choice? And the reality for him is it's both. But when our logic and emotion align, we point to the logic as the reason for what we do. We are always making emotional decisions. The key is to learn how to align those things effectively. So back to our 3 drivers model. We perceive the world and then we do something. That's what most people think happens. It's not what happens. There's a gap. Viktor Frankl's quote, there's a gap between perception and reality.
Space, yeah.
Space. I was thinking gap. What really happens is the robotic part of our brain perceives and processes massive amounts of information. It's all kind of basic sense-making things. And puts it on what I call a screen. So imagine, if you will, a screen sitting there, the robot's behind it, and it projects an image onto that screen. And that happens very quickly, but there's that space when the robotic is filtering, editing, putting in bias, putting in noise and distortion. It goes on the screen. We don't react to what is happening around us. We react to the screen. Our thoughts and emotions are based on the screen, and that robot is the one putting that image on the screen. So all of life really is about understanding how to manage that screen. If you look at, Start With Why, if you look at Stephen Covey's work, all the content has been out there for years. I love learning all kinds of different things. And I'm always looking for, what is the common ground? What is the simplest version of why this works? Mm-hmm. And I think you can take any book you want, any of the best content out there, and realize what it does is help a person manage their screen. Because it doesn't work to just say, well, I'm going to emotionally force myself to do something. I'm triggered. I'm just going to make myself not be triggered. It doesn't work. I'm triggered because of what's on that screen. And until I can understand what's going on in that 3-driver game, I'm not going to get out of that protection, out of that triggered mode.
So Jeff, is another word for the screen, sort of the stories I'm telling myself? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, a number of people talk about what story are you telling yourself. That is our context. It's our paradigm. It's our filter. All of those are what goes into the screen. I like the visual of it because, and I actually use these little stick figures where I have a stick figure of my emotion and my logic staring at this screen and kind of having an internal dialogue. I mean, think about the times you've tried to get yourself to do something you didn't want to do, exercise. I'm going to go to the gym. And emotionally, we look at the screen and go, ick, sweating, maybe some bleeding. I don't want to do it. Why would I do this? And logically, we're saying, no, it's healthy and we're being right. So we're having this internal conversation about the screen. Push comes to shove, over time, emotion wins. And that's why so many people have a hard time, making any kind of meaningful change, because until you change what's on that screen, until you reprogram the robot that is controlling the screen, emotions are going to keep pushing against what you're trying to do logically.
So how does this show up in the workplace? I loved your example about the guy with a credit card balance, but how does a screen interfere with or inhibit our decision making, our productivity in the workplace?
I think the area there's 4 specific skills that I work into the class. There's a mobile app, by the way. So you learn these skills, and then you've got the app to help build, incorporate these things into your life. So it's be purpose-driven, be resilient, be curious, which is about being unbiased and cleaning up your screen, and be collaborative. So The best answer to your question is around collaboration, and which has a lot to do with, do I go out and seek information and feedback that I don't want to hear? And if I gather some people and say, give me some thoughts and inputs on this, will they tell me what I don't want to hear? So there's a lot of areas we could focus on, but I think one of the most underserved is helping teams communicate things to each other that they're uncomfortable talking about, right? I don't think that's a great idea. Do I know how to voice that? And do I Or do I not voice it because I feel like it's going to trigger my boss? It's going to trigger my coworker. So what's on the screen? My boss just said, hey, here's the plan. Here's what I think we should do. Here's what we're going to do. And in my head, I'm like, well, that's going to fail. That's totally miserable. That's the conversation I have in my head. Do I voice up? Do I say anything about it? I consider saying that, and even thinking about it, an image goes on my screen. What's that image? It's my boss getting triggered. And I know them. And so maybe they get quiet, maybe they react strongly, maybe they snap back at me. I mean, different people do different things when they're triggered, as we've covered. So unless I can reprogram my robot to believe I can safely speak up when I disagree, I'm never going to. Or I won't do it until I don't care anymore and I'm ready to get fired, or I'm already job hunting.
You know, both of us have talked about this in other contexts using the word opposition. And in my book, Mission First People Always, I have a chapter on the value of healthy opposition. So it sounds like, developing that courage to say something that's in opposition to what the boss just said or what the majority have agreed on. That's what you're talking about here, right?
100%, except develop courage is probably not going to happen. Emotions win. What I have to do is realize that it's not a risky thing to do.
So lean into logic at that moment and say, the smartest thing to do is to say this. Yes?
Nope, because logic doesn't win. Emotion wins. But that's the way we tell ourselves. I mean, how many times have you had that discussion in your head of what you know you should do? And it makes perfect sense. I should totally do that. I umpire youth baseball. And before the game, we got scorekeepers on either side. And I'm alone out there. And sometimes I mess up the count and I get my clicker wrong. So I always tell whoever's working the book, hey, sometimes if I get the count wrong, let me know. And this woman looks up and she goes, yeah, I'm not doing that. So, because she wasn't going to like, hey, ref, you're wrong. The count's wrong. There was no way I was going to get her to interrupt the game. Now, sometimes I have that talk with coaches and they're like, yeah, I'll let you know. They don't care. But she was like, there's no way. I'm screaming from the stands. You're wrong. Oh, that's not the count. Right. So, hey, just be courageous. Hey, you want the count to be right. I mean, I could tell her all those things and logically she'd go, yeah, I'm sure that's true, but there's no way I'm interrupting the game to tell you you're wrong. Right. So in the logic versus emotion battle, emotion's going to win. And just think how many times in your life you've tried to logically get yourself to do something. Maybe we can do it for short term. That's called willpower and it wears off. So the real question is, how do you change the screen?
Yes. How do you change the screen, Jeff?
Right. Let's go back in the Wayback Machine. War Games, Matthew Broderick, many, many years ago. There's an opening scene in this movie where there's these two guys in a missile silo. And back in the day, they had to both turn their key to launch the missile. So the message comes in, we're having a nuclear war, launch your missile. And one guy turns his key and the other guy gets the key and he says, I can't do it. I won't do it. And the other guy's like, turn your key. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And he pulls out a gun. He's going, turn your key, because you had to both turn the key so one guy couldn't go crazy and launch the missile. The only way the screen changes, the only way you reprogram your robot, the only way you change your unconscious interpretations of the moment is when your logic and emotion agree for a long enough period of time. If you don't emotionally want whatever it is you're trying to program into your screen, the robot will never take that programming.
Okay.
Right. This is why, January in the gym is so crowded. All the people whose logic has got them into the gym. And the emotion's like, well, okay, yeah, we're going to be rippling and buffing no time. We're just going to be shedding weight, by January, by February, the emotion wins. So I was years ago, I was having dinner once, and it was a Sunday night. I was in a Sunday night basketball league, and I'm like, okay, well, I got to go. I got a game tonight. And my mother-in-law goes, oh, you're so disciplined. You exercise all the time. And I thought, well, I'm not disciplined. In fact, I think I'm kind of lazy. It took zero discipline for me to go play that basketball. I emotionally, I was irritated. I had to wait until we were done with dinner with my mother-in-law. I wanted to be there a half hour earlier. I emotionally enjoy playing basketball. There's no discipline involved. Talk to people who exercise and they don't talk about discipline. They enjoy it. Their emotions behind it. They may have to go through some periods of time. Like I lift weights, I don't enjoy it, but I do it so that I still play baseball. I still play basketball. I'm 56. And if I just do a little bit of weight training, I'm less likely to get injured. So it takes a little bit of logic overriding my emotion to get myself into the gym. You can do that for short periods of time. Back to the conference room, I'm watching my boss do something that I know is not going to work. Do I speak up? If that's using logic to override emotion, it's not likely. And especially if the last time I saw someone do it, they got in trouble. So if I'm a leader, I need to help them emotionally feel like this is a good idea, not a bad idea. It's not about logic. And I've got tools on collaboration that teach people how to have that conversation.
So tell us, you mentioned you've got tools, and that's part of the training that you're offering. Tell the audience a little bit about, and by the way, we're talking to Jeff Gaines. He is the creator of a new course called Triggerproof. He's making the case for this new training on the episode today. How does the training work? How long is it? Is this, do I got to go to class for 8 weeks, 4 nights a week to
8 weeks.
master this?
It was comfortable. We'll cut it to 6 for your listeners.
All right.
After 30 years in the business, there's 2 realities that are always constraints, and that we always hear from clients. I don't have enough time and I don't have enough money.
And how much time is the most valuable
time's bigger than the money usually. Yeah. So I've designed it to be as user-friendly for the real world as possible. I'd love to have, so bottom line, it's 3 hours, virtual or in person is how it's designed. I can do it faster. I can do it longer. The mobile app has some videos that people watch ahead of time, about 20 minutes, fast-paced, interactive, fun, stick figures, things moving around. It's not boring lecture. So people come prepped and primed a little bit. That means I can go faster when we're together in person. And the together in person is mostly about doing and small group work and having conversations, learning how to use these things. So 3 hours in person, a little bit of prep work. And then it's learning how to use the mobile app during the course so that afterward, when I'm feeling triggered, I know how to be resilient. There's a resilient tool. How do I get myself untriggered is what resilience is about. I need to be purpose-driven, because if I'm not really clear the difference between internal purpose and making money, anything will trigger me. I need to be curious. So I have a tough decision to make. How am I going to make sure that my bias isn't creeping into this? So there's a tool for being, really critical thinking. It's not a good marketing term, so I call it be curious, right? Who wants to think critical, right? And then collaboration. How do I, so the structure is a little bit of pre-work, to help get the most out of our time together, 3 hours in person or virtual. I'd love to have some follow-up sessions, but it's designed to be standalone. I'm going to encourage clients to do some reinforcement and follow-up, but recognize most people are like, yeah, that's a great idea. We'd love to. We don't have time. So
Jeff, the app also serves as a job aid after training to reinforce and sustain what we've done together.
You bet. How much is going to stick in people's heads is always something we need to consider. So they can watch the videos again. They can dig deeper into what are those 3 drivers again. And in the moment of collaboration, it's really literally a tool to help prep me for that meeting and how to run a collaboration discussion. So that people aren't expected to memorize these things, or it's a PDF that goes on a folder they never look at, or they print it and it goes in the recycle. The reality is, if it's not a tool in their hand when they need it, it's probably not going to get used.
I've got 2 more questions for you, Jeff. I just looked at the time, and time has flown by here. But I want to ask you 2 questions. What's the business case if you're sitting across from an organizational executive, a leader, someone who is responsible for training in the organization? What's the business case for this? How do I make money? How do I improve the lives of my people? How does this make sense for me as a business person bringing this in? Why should I do this?
The shortest answer I would give is that a lot of leaders are still leading like it's 6 years ago. What's funny is I've been in the business 30 years, and my first 10, 15 years, I used to say a lot of leaders are leading like it's 50 years ago. But today, if you're leading like it's 6 years ago, you're way behind the times. And the reality of today's workplace is the expectations, the pace, the demands are like never before. And you need to give people the skills to thrive and stay engaged in that chaos. And, I get the challenges of time and money, but if I'm a decision maker, I've got to be able to quantify what the cost of not spending that money is.
And it seems like the investment you're asking of people, both in terms of time and money, is modest relative.
It is. I'm not. I'm at a friendly price point compared to the big players in the business. I'm not a solo operation. I've got a small team, but it's cost effective and it's time efficient, and that's by design, knowing that that's just the reality of what companies need from me.
So, Jeff, here's my final question, and my audience knows this is coming. It's the way I land the plane on every episode. What's one piece of advice you could give my listeners, my viewers, since we're now on YouTube, that they could implement right away this afternoon, tomorrow, depending on when they're listening to this, Monday morning, that would make them a better leader, a better teammate, a better employee, a better human being? What's one little thing they can do?
Everyone needs to answer the question, other than to get a paycheck, why do I work here? And if you can't answer that question, you're pretty easy to trigger. And I think that's the same for parenting. It's the same for significant other relationships. Other than because the state requires me to, why am I parenting my child? Right? So all of that is really about internal purpose and doing things because I know this is who I am and the value that I bring to the world. We haven't talked much about the purpose piece, but the first of the 4 skills is be purposeful. And it's very much about helping people explore how much of it is what I'm supposed to do because society expects it of me, and how much of it is this is really about who I am and what I want to bring.
Yeah, and that ties back into the emotional piece. I want to be this person and add this kind of value to the world. Jeff, thanks for being a great guest. I've enjoyed this conversation immensely. I'm proud of you and what you're doing. I think it's always meaningful when people step out and bring a set of ideas into the world and invite others to engage with and examine those ideas. And you've got a purpose in doing this. You're trying to make workplaces better places. And so I just appreciate you being here, appreciate what you're doing. To my audience, Jeff's contact information is in the show notes. You can find him. You can reach out to him. He'd be happy to talk to you more about Triggerproof, bringing it into your organization. And if you tell him that you heard about Triggerproof from Dr. Mike, there might be some benefit in doing that. So I encourage you to do that. Until next time, we're going to keep bringing you good ideas. People who are thoughtful and care about better leadership in the workplace. And so until next time, be a good person, be a good leader, be a good teammate, and join us again on the next episode of the Mission First People Always podcast.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to create a strong, more people-centric and empowered culture for your organization, visit drmikepatterson.com.